The bustling streets of Manhattan were alive with their usual symphony of honking horns and hurried footsteps as Donald Trump emerged from a high-stakes business meeting at Trump Tower. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows between the towering skyscrapers, and despite the exhaustion from a day filled with negotiations, Trump decided to walk a few blocks to clear his mind. As he passed by the old brick buildings that lined the street, his security detail keeping a respectful distance, something caught his eye. Among the handful of homeless people seeking shelter in a building's recessed doorway, there was a face that stirred a distant memory. At first, he tried to brush it off. In a city of millions, coincidences were bound to happen. But something about the woman's features, though weathered by hardship, seemed hauntingly familiar. He slowed his pace, then stopped completely. The woman, wrapped in layers of worn clothing, had her head down, a cardboard sign resting against her knees. Her gray-streaked hair, once a vibrant blonde, fell forward, partially hiding her face, but when she looked up to thank a passing stranger for dropping some change, Trump felt his heart skip a beat. "Catherine?" he said, almost to himself at first, then louder, "Catherine Miller?" The woman's head snapped up, her eyes widening with a mix of recognition and shame. She quickly tried to shrink back into the shadows of the doorway, but it was too late. Their eyes had met, and in that moment, decades of memories came flooding back. Trump remembered her from their days at New York Military Academy, the brilliant girl who could solve complex math equations faster than anyone else, who had dreams of designing buildings that would change the skyline of cities. Catherine had been one of the few female students of the academy, and her determination to succeed in a male-dominated environment had earned her both respect and admiration. "Mr. Trump," she said softly, her voice hoarse but still carrying traces of the confident young woman she had once been. I didn't expect to see you here." Trump motioned for his security to give them some space. He took a step closer, still trying to reconcile the image of the successful student he remembered with the person before him. "Catherine, what happened?" "The last I heard, you were doing incredible things in architecture." The people passing by on the street began to slow down, some recognizing Trump, others simply curious about why someone like him would be talking to a homeless person. But Trump paid them no attention. His focus was entirely on his former classmate, someone who had once shared the same dreams of making it big in New York City. Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the thin blanket around her shoulders. "Life has a way of throwing curveballs," she said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sometimes you swing and miss." Trump's mind was already racing with questions and possibilities. His expression, usually guarded in public, showed genuine concern. He remembered Catherine as one of the most promising students in their class, creative, hardworking, and determined. Seeing her here, on the streets of the city they'd both loved, struck him deeply. "How long have you been out here?" he asked, his voice quieter now, more personal. "A while," she replied vaguely, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. Things just kept piling up, one setback after another. A cool breeze whipped through the street, causing Catherine to pull her layers tighter around herself. Trump noticed she was wearing what appeared to be several sweaters, all showing signs of wear and repeated use. The sight made something shift inside him, a realization of how quickly life could change, how fragile success could be. The sun was starting to set, casting an orange glow across the city streets. The evening crowd was beginning to thin out, replaced by the night shift of office cleaners and restaurant workers. Trump knew he couldn't just walk away, not from someone who had once sat beside him in class, who had shared the same ambitious dreams of making their mark on the world. Standing there on that busy Manhattan street, Trump made a decision. He couldn't change the past, but he could certainly impact what happened next. As he reached for his phone to make a call, he knew this chance encounter would lead to something significant, not just for Catherine, but for him as well. The story of their unexpected reunion was just beginning, and neither of them could have predicted how this moment would unfold into something that would change both their lives in ways they never expected. Catherine's story unfolded slowly as she sat in the warmth of a nearby coffee shop, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. Trump had insisted on getting her somewhere comfortable to talk, choosing a quiet corner booth away from curious onlookers. The familiar scent of coffee and freshly baked pastries created a stark contrast to the life she'd been living on the streets. "I never thought I'd be telling this story," she began, her voice growing stronger with each sip of coffee, "especially not to you." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "After graduation, everything seemed to be falling into place. I got my architecture degree, married my college sweetheart, and started my own firm. We were living the dream, designing homes and small commercial buildings." Trump listened intently, noting how Catherine's eyes still lit up when she talked about architecture. The passion was still there, buried beneath layers of hardship. "Then David, my husband, got sick. It happened so fast. One day he was fine, the next." Her voice trailed off, and she took a moment to compose herself. "Cancer, stage 4. We spent everything we had on treatments, but nothing worked. He was gone within 8 months." The evening crowd buzzed around them, unaware of the heavy conversation taking place in their corner. Trump remained silent, allowing Catherine to tell her story at her own pace. "After David died, I tried to keep the firm going, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. I made some bad decisions, took risks I shouldn't have. There was this big project, a luxury apartment complex. I invested everything we had left, but the developer went bankrupt halfway through construction. Just like that, all our savings, our retirement fund, everything was gone." She smiled bitterly, stirring her coffee absently. Depression hit hard. "I couldn't focus on work, started missing deadlines. Clients started pulling out. I sold our house to keep the firm afloat, moved into a tiny apartment, but it wasn't enough. The bills kept piling up, medical debt from David's treatment, business loans, credit cards." Trump watched as Catherine's hands trembled slightly, and he signaled the waitress for more coffee and some food. He remembered her as someone who always had everything under control, who made success look effortless. Life had shown its cruel side to her. "My sister offered to help, but I was too proud. Thought I could figure it out on my own. By the time I realized how bad things had gotten, I was already behind on rent. Started sleeping in my car at first, told myself it was temporary. But when the car got towed because I couldn't afford the parking tickets," she shrugged, the gesture speaking volumes about her resignation to fate. The waitress brought over a plate of sandwiches, and Catherine stared at them as if they were from another world. 8 months, she continued softly. "That's how long I've been on the streets. You know what the worst part is? I still carry my architecture license in my bag. Renewing it every year was the one thing I refused to give up, even when I couldn't afford a decent meal." Trump leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "Why didn't you reach out to any of our old classmates?" "The alumni network?" Catherine laughed, but there was no joy in it. "And say what?" "Remember me, the star student? Well, I'm homeless now. Can you help?" Pride is a funny thing. Sometimes it's all you have left, even when it's the very thing standing in your way. As she talked, Trump noticed how she unconsciously straightened her posture, how her gestures became more animated when discussing architecture. The person he remembered was still there, buried beneath the weight of circumstances. "The hardest part isn't even the physical discomfort," she continued. "It's the invisibility. People look right through you, like you don't exist. After a while, you start to believe it yourself." Outside, the city lights were coming on, creating a glittering backdrop through the coffee shop window. Catherine stared at them, lost in thought. "You know, I used to look at these buildings and imagine designing something even better. Now I just hope to find a safe doorway to sleep in." The stark honesty of her words hung in the air between them. Trump sat back, processing everything he'd heard. The story of Catherine's fall from success to survival on the streets wasn't just about bad luck or poor decisions. It was about how quickly life could unravel, how thin the line was between stability and chaos. As the evening drew to a close, Trump knew he couldn't simply walk away from this situation. Catherine's story had affected him deeply, not just because of their shared past, but because it highlighted how easily anyone could find themselves in similar circumstances. The coffee shop was starting to close up for the night, chairs being stacked on tables, floors being swept. Catherine looked at the remaining half of a sandwich, carefully wrapping it in a napkin, a habit born from months of not knowing where her next meal would come from. Trump watched this simple action, and in that moment, he made a decision that would set in motion a chain of events neither of them could have anticipated. As the coffee shop staff began their closing routine, Trump pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Within minutes, his assistant had arranged a room at a nearby luxury hotel. Catherine's initial reaction was to refuse, but Trump's determination was evident in his voice. "This isn't charity, Catherine," he said firmly as they stepped out into the evening air. "Think of it as an investment in an old friend's future." His words carried the weight of someone who had seen both success and failure in his life, understanding the fine line between the two. The short walk to the hotel was filled with an awkward silence. Catherine clutched her worn backpack, containing everything she owned, close to her chest. The doorman's eyes widened slightly at the sight of them, but Trump's presence prevented any questions. The hotel lobby was a world away from the streets Catherine had called home for the past months. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across marble floors, and the soft sound of classical music filled the air. She felt out of place, acutely aware of her shabby appearance among the well-dressed guests. Mr. Trump, the hotel manager, appeared, keycard in hand. "The suite is ready as requested." Catherine's hands trembled as she took the keycard. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. "Say you'll accept help," Trump replied. "Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is admit we need a hand up." The suite was more spacious than any apartment Catherine had lived in, even during her successful days. The view of the city skyline brought tears to her eyes. She had forgotten what it was like to look at the city from above, rather than from its shadows. "There's something else," Trump said, pulling out a business card. "Tomorrow morning, my personal doctor will come to see you." "No arguments," he added when Catherine started to protest. "You need a proper checkup." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I remember the designs you used to sketch during breaks at the academy. You had a gift for seeing possibilities where others saw only problems. That gift doesn't disappear just because life knocked you down." Catherine sank into a plush armchair, the reality of her situation starting to sink in. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. Trump walked to the window, looking out at the city he knew so well. "Because 30 years ago, we sat in the same classroom, dreaming about making our mark on this city. Life took us in different directions, but that shared dream, it means something." He turned back to face her. "I'm not just offering you a few nights in a hotel. I'm offering you a chance to rebuild. But you have to be willing to accept help, to let go of pride, and to believe in yourself again." The emotion in his voice was genuine, surprising even himself. "My team will be in touch tomorrow. Get some rest, take a hot shower, order whatever you want from room service. Tomorrow, we start planning your comeback." As he headed toward the door, Catherine called out, "Wait." He turned to see her struggling with words. "Thank you," she finally managed, "for seeing me when everyone else looked away." Trump nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. "Get some sleep, Catherine. Tomorrow's a new day." After he left, Catherine stood in the middle of the luxurious suite, hardly daring to believe this was real. She caught her reflection in a mirror. A stranger looking back at her, worn and weathered, but with a tiny spark of hope in her eyes that hadn't been there hours before. She walked slowly to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and watched as steam filled the room. As she stepped under the hot water for the first time in months, tears mixed with the streaming water. It wasn't just about the physical comfort, it was about feeling human again. Later that night, wrapped in a soft hotel robe, Catherine stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. The same building she had been sleeping beneath now sparkled before her like stars. She thought about Trump's words, about shared dreams and second chances. For the first time in years, she reached into her worn backpack and pulled out her old sketchbook. The pages were creased and water-stained, but the drawings inside still held the power of possibility. With trembling fingers, she picked up a hotel pen and began to sketch, letting her imagination flow onto the paper. As the night deepened, the city that had been her adversary for so long began to look different. From this height, she could see it as she used to, not as a place of harsh streets and cold nights, but as a canvas of endless possibilities. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, in this moment, Catherine allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten, hope. And in a penthouse across the city, Trump sat at his desk, already making calls and setting plans in motion, knowing that sometimes the best investments aren't in buildings, but in people. The morning brought a flurry of activity to Catherine's hotel suite. Trump's team moved with precision and purpose, each person playing their part in what felt like a carefully orchestrated plan. The personal doctor arrived first, conducting a thorough examination while maintaining a respectful and gentle approach. "Your blood pressure is higher than I'd like," the doctor explained, making notes on his tablet. "And there are signs of malnutrition, but nothing we can't address with proper care and time." He prescribed several medications and recommended a nutrition plan, all of which Trump's assistant immediately arranged to have delivered. As the doctor packed up his equipment, a professional stylist and clothing consultant arrived, bringing with them several racks of business attire. Catherine found herself overwhelmed by their presence, but the stylist's warm smile and kind words helped ease her anxiety. "We're not here to change who you are," the stylist assured her, noting Catherine's discomfort. "Just to help you present your best self to the world again." She helped Catherine select several professional outfits, teaching her how to mix and match pieces to create different looks. While Catherine was being fitted for clothes, Trump's investigative team was hard at work. They pieced together the details of her story, verifying her credentials and examining the circumstances that led to her downfall. They discovered that the developer who had bankrupted her firm had a history of similar failures, leaving a trail of ruined businesses in his wake. By afternoon, a financial advisor had arrived to help Catherine understand her situation and plan a path forward. They sat at the suite's dining table, spreading documents across its polished surface. "Your architecture license is still valid. That's a huge asset," the advisor noted, reviewing her paperwork. "And while your credit has taken a hit, there are programs available for professionals rebuilding after hardship. We can work with this." Catherine listened intently, taking notes in her sketchbook, the same one she'd been carrying all these months. The advisor noticed how she drew small diagrams to help understand the financial concepts, her architect's mind naturally translating everything into visual terms. Late in the afternoon, Trump himself returned to check on the progress. He found Catherine surrounded by papers, drawings, and plans, looking more like her old self in new business attire. The change in her appearance was striking, but it was the return of purpose in her eyes that really stood out. "How are you holding up?" he asked, taking a seat across from her. Catherine looked up from her notes, managing a small smile. "It's overwhelming, but good overwhelming. Your team has been incredible." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "They found out about the developer who caused my firm's collapse. Apparently, I wasn't his only victim." Trump nodded gravely. "We're looking into that situation. There might be legal options worth pursuing, but that's for another day. Right now, let's focus on your immediate future." He pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. "I had my team research some opportunities. There's a small architectural firm in the city looking for experienced designers. They specialize in sustainable urban housing, something I remember you being passionate about back in school." Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder. "An actual job opportunity?" she whispered, almost afraid to believe it. "An interview," Trump corrected. "The rest will be up to you. But first, we need to get you back on your feet properly." "The hotel suite is yours for the next month, no arguments," he added as Catherine started to protest. "My team has also found a small apartment you can move into after that. The rent is reasonable, and the location is good." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "But here's what I really want to discuss. You're not just going to interview for a job, you're going to share your story. Your experience, both the success and the fall, gives you a unique perspective on urban housing needs. Use that." Catherine looked confused. "Share my story? Why would anyone want to hear about my failures?" "Because your story isn't about failure," Trump replied firmly. "It's about resilience, about how quickly life can change, and how important it is to have support systems in place. Your experience could help create better housing solutions for others at risk." As the evening approached, more plans were put into motion. Trump's team had arranged for counseling sessions to help Catherine process her trauma, financial advisors to help her rebuild her credit, and even a small stipend to help her get back on her feet. Before leaving, Trump paused at the door. "Remember, Catherine, this isn't a handout. It's an investment in someone I believe in. Don't let pride stand in your way again." Left alone in the suite, Catherine returned to the window, looking out at the city with new eyes. In her hand, she held her old architecture license, the plastic worn but still valid. On the table behind her lay new clothes, new plans, and new possibilities. She pulled out her sketchbook once more, but this time instead of just drawing buildings, she began to write. Her story, her journey from success to survival and back again, flowed onto the pages. Perhaps Trump was right. Maybe her experience could help others understand the fine line between stability and crisis and the importance of reaching out when you need help. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity as Trump's comprehensive plan for Catherine's rehabilitation took shape. Each morning brought new challenges, but also new opportunities for growth. The luxury hotel suite had become her temporary command center, where she methodically rebuilt her life piece by piece. Catherine's first therapy session was particularly transformative. In the therapist's warm office, surrounded by soft lighting and gentle colors, she finally allowed herself to process the trauma of the past few years. It wasn't just losing David, she explained, her voice steady but emotional. It was losing myself. I became someone I didn't recognize anymore. The therapist helped her understand that her experience on the streets, though painful, had given her invaluable insights into urban living and human resilience. You've seen the city from every angle now, the therapist noted. That's a perspective most architects never get. Meanwhile, Trump's team had been quietly working behind the scenes. They discovered that several other architects and small business owners had fallen victim to the same developer who had bankrupted Catherine's firm. A legal team began building a case, gathering evidence and testimonies. The job interview at the sustainable housing firm was scheduled for the following week. Catherine spent hours preparing, not just reviewing architectural principles, but thinking about how to present her unique journey as an asset rather than a liability. "Tell me about your approach to urban housing," the interviewing architect asked, studying Catherine's portfolio. Catherine took a deep breath before responding. "My perspective has evolved recently. I used to design spaces thinking I understood what people needed. Now I know that every corner of a building, every doorway, every alcove has meaning. People don't just live in buildings, they survive in them, heal in them, dream in them." The interview lasted over 2 hours, extending well beyond its scheduled time as Catherine shared her vision for more inclusive urban design. Her personal experience had given her insights into how buildings could better serve all members of society, not just those who could afford luxury apartments. Back at the hotel, Trump received regular updates on Catherine's progress. He was particularly interested in her ideas about incorporating emergency housing solutions into regular urban development projects. This could be bigger than just one job, he mused to his team. She might be onto something important here. Catherine's health was improving too. Regular meals, proper medical care, and a safe place to sleep had worked wonders. The haunted look in her eyes was fading, replaced by a growing confidence. She started joining other architects for coffee meetings, gradually rebuilding her professional network. One evening, while reviewing her progress with Trump's team, Catherine pulled out her sketchbook. The pages were now filled with new designs, buildings that incorporated flexible spaces that could serve multiple purposes, including emergency housing. What if we could design buildings that help prevent people from ending up on the streets in the first place? She explained, pointing to her drawings. Trump was impressed by her innovation. "This isn't just about architecture anymore," he observed. "This is about social change through design." The plan was coming together better than anyone had expected. The sustainable housing firm was extremely interested in Catherine's ideas, and discussions had moved beyond a simple job offer to the possibility of her leading a new initiative focused on inclusive urban design. But perhaps the most significant breakthrough came when Catherine finally reached out to her sister. After years of silence born of shame and pride, she made the call. "I'm ready to reconnect," she told her sister, her voice strong and clear. "I'm not the same person I was, and that's not necessarily a bad thing." As the month drew to a close, Catherine stood in her hotel suite one last time, packing her few belongings, now supplemented by professional clothes and the tools of her trade. Tomorrow, she would move into her new apartment, a modest but comfortable space that represented another step in her journey back. She looked out at the city skyline, remembering how differently it had looked from the streets below. Her fingers traced the outline of a building on her sketchbook. The design was different from anything she had drawn before. It incorporated elements that only someone who had experienced homelessness would think to include. Trump's investment in her recovery wasn't just about helping one person, it was about transforming a life experience, even a painful one, into something that could benefit others. Catherine's story was becoming more than a tale of personal redemption. It was evolving into a mission to change how cities care for all their residents. As she closed her sketchbook that evening, Catherine realized that sometimes the hardest falls lead to the most important insights. Her future wasn't just about rebuilding her own life anymore, it was about using her experience to help build a better world for others. The transition from the hotel to Catherine's new apartment marked the beginning of her true recovery journey. The space was modest, a one-bedroom unit in a well-maintained building, but to Catherine, it represented something profound, a new beginning. She spent her first evening arranging her few possessions, including her growing collection of architectural drawings and plans. The sustainable housing firm had offered her more than just a job. They wanted her to lead a special project combining affordable housing with emergency shelter solutions. Her first day at work was a mix of nerves and excitement. Walking into the office wearing one of her new business suits, she felt both like her old self and someone entirely new. "We've never had someone with your unique perspective," her new boss explained during the morning meeting. "Your experience gives you insights that most architects spend their entire careers never gaining." The team listened intently as Catherine shared her vision for buildings that could serve multiple purposes and help prevent homelessness before it started. The legal case against the developer who had bankrupted her firm was also progressing. Trump's legal team had uncovered a pattern of fraudulent practices, and other victims were coming forward. Catherine's testimony would be crucial to the case, but first she had to face her own past. During one particularly challenging therapy session, Catherine finally confronted her feelings about her husband's death and the cascade of events that followed. "I thought I was honoring David's memory by refusing help," she admitted. "Now I realize that accepting help is sometimes the bravest thing you can do." Her sister had become a regular presence in her life again, often dropping by the apartment with home-cooked meals and simply sitting with Catherine as she worked on her designs late into the night. Their relationship, though different from before, had grown stronger through the experience of reconnection. One evening, while working on a particularly challenging design problem, Catherine received an unexpected call from Trump. He wanted to see her latest projects. The next day, she found herself in his office, spreading her drawings across his desk. "See these areas here," she explained, pointing to specific features in her designs. "They're flexible spaces that can be converted into emergency housing during crisis, and these common areas are designed to foster community support systems." Her passion was evident as she described how buildings could be designed to prevent isolation and promote healing. Trump listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed he grasped the deeper implications of her work. "This isn't just about housing," he observed. "It's about dignity and community." The weeks turned into months, and Catherine's transformation continued. Her health improved steadily, and she started volunteering at a local homeless shelter, offering both architectural expertise and personal understanding to their expansion plans. Her first major project at the firm was a mixed-use development that incorporated many of her innovative ideas. During the community presentation, she spoke not just as an architect, but as someone who understood firsthand the importance of thoughtful urban design. "Buildings aren't just structures," she told the audience. "They're shelters, sanctuaries, and sometimes lifelines. Every doorway, every corner, every shared space can either bring people together or push them apart. We need to design with both purpose and compassion." The presentation was a success, and word of Catherine's unique approach began spreading through the architectural community. Other firms started reaching out, interested in incorporating her ideas into their own projects. One rainy evening, as Catherine walked home from work, she passed the doorway where Trump had found her months ago. She stopped for a moment, remembering the despair she had felt then. A homeless woman was huddled in the same spot, and Catherine did something she never thought she would do again. She stopped to talk. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but before leaving, Catherine handed the woman her card and information about local resources. "There's help available," she said softly, "and there's no shame in accepting it." Back in her apartment, Catherine added new sketches to her ever-growing collection. Her designs were evolving, becoming more nuanced as she combined her professional expertise with her personal experience. She was creating something unprecedented in architecture, spaces that didn't just house people, but helped them rebuild their lives. Trump's regular check-ins had become less frequent as Catherine grew more independent, but his support remained steady. He had become not just a benefactor, but a colleague who respected her professional insights. As she prepared for bed that night, Catherine caught her reflection in the mirror. The person looking back at her was neither the successful architect she had once been nor the homeless woman she had become. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone who understood that sometimes life's hardest falls lead to the most important insights. Her recovery journey wasn't just about getting back what she had lost, it was about creating something new from the experience. Through her designs and her story, she was helping to build a world where fewer people would have to face the struggles she had endured, and where those who did would find more paths back to stability. 1 year after their chance encounter, Trump sat in the audience of a major architectural conference where Catherine was the keynote speaker. The woman who stood confidently at the podium barely resembled the person he'd found in that doorway. She wore a well-tailored suit, her hair neatly styled, but it was the light in her eyes that showed the most dramatic change. Architecture isn't just about buildings, Catherine began, her voice clear and strong. It's about creating spaces that catch people when they fall. She clicked through slides showing her innovative designs, buildings that seamlessly integrated emergency housing with regular apartments, community spaces designed to foster connection, and features that could adapt to changing needs. The legal case against the corrupt developer had been settled successfully, helping not just Catherine but dozens of other victims recover some of their losses. She had used her portion to establish a foundation focused on preventing homelessness through innovative urban design. Her first major project was now under construction, a mixed-use development that included affordable housing, emergency shelter spaces, and areas for community support services. The building's unique design had already won several awards and was being studied by architects worldwide. "Remember when you said this could be bigger than just one job?" she asked Trump during the conference lunch break. "You were right, but I don't think either of us knew just how big it would become." The foundation she had started was working with cities across the country, helping them rethink their approach to urban housing. Catherine's experience had given her a unique ability to bridge the gap between developers, city planners, and social services. She regularly visited homeless shelters, not just as an architect, but as someone who understood. Her story of falling from success to homelessness and back again gave hope to others, showing that with the right support, recovery was possible. One evening, Trump invited Catherine to visit Trump Tower. As they looked out over the city, she pulled out her original sketchbook, the one she'd carried even during her darkest days. "I want you to see something," she said, flipping to the earliest pages. "These were my drawings from before. And these," she turned to newer pages, "on what I draw now." The difference was striking. Her earlier designs, while technically excellent, focused mainly on aesthetics and function. The newer ones showed a deeper understanding of human needs, how spaces could heal, protect, and nurture community. "We're breaking ground on the second project next month," she told him. "This one includes a training center where homeless individuals can learn job skills. The construction company has agreed to hire graduates from the program." Trump nodded approvingly. "You've turned your experience into something powerful," he observed. "This isn't just about buildings anymore, it's about changing lives." Catherine smiled, remembering how far she'd come. Her sister was now actively involved in the foundation's work, and together they were creating the support systems they wished had existed during Catherine's crisis. The final piece of her recovery fell into place when she bought a small house, nothing fancy but completely her own. The day she moved in, she hung her old architecture license next to her new awards, a reminder of both where she'd been and how far she'd come. That evening, standing in her new home, Catherine received an unexpected package from Trump. Inside was a framed photo of her first building design post-recovery, along with a note that read, "Sometimes the best view comes after the hardest climb." She placed the frame on her desk, next to her ever-present sketchbook. Her journey had come full circle, but it wasn't really an ending, it was a beginning. Her experience had shaped her into someone who could help change the way cities approached housing and homelessness. As she settled into her new life, Catherine often thought about that chance encounter with Trump on the street. One person's willingness to stop and really see her had sparked a chain of events that not only changed her life, but was now changing countless others. The sun set over the city she'd once feared, now casting a gentle glow through her windows. Catherine opened her sketchbook to a fresh page and began to draw. She wasn't just designing buildings anymore, she was designing hope, one blueprint at a time. And somewhere in the city, Trump looked out his own window, knowing that sometimes the best investments aren't in buildings or businesses, but in believing in someone when they've stopped believing in themselves. Catherine's story had become more than just a tale of personal redemption. It was proof that with the right support and opportunity, anyone could rebuild their life and go on to help others do the same. "We all fall," Catherine had said in her speech earlier that day. "The trick is building a world with enough handholds to help us climb back up." And that's exactly what she was doing, one design, one building, one life at a time.